I was one of the co-founders of IndieBio, helped and funded over 67 biotech companies, many names you've probably heard of. Memphis Meats, Geltor, Clara Foods, New Wave Foods, helped and advised a whole bunch of other companies. Most recently, I've started Wild Earth. I did not realize this would be al fresco, i.e. no slides. So I kind of wanted to open it up. So I want to give a little bit of background about why I made the decision with my co-founders, my team, to go after the pet food space. Most people thought it was kind of a ridiculous place to go. Post IndieBio, post building a whole bunch of human food companies, which are pretty transformative in their own right. Why did I and my team choose to go into pet food? I'll give you a quick overview of quick reason why. And most people don't realize this. In the US alone, between 25 to 30% of the meat that we consume is eaten by our pets, right? That's a pretty powerful statistic. So if you want to make an impact on animal agriculture and you're not looking at the pet food space, you're leaving out 30% of our meat consumption. If we can reduce it by half, we reduce our meat consumption in the US by about 15%. It's massive. Now, not only that, if you look at the number of pets that we currently have in the US, currently we have about 180 million dogs and cats in the US alone. 180 million. We actually have more dogs and cats in the US than we have children, right? It's kind of there are all of these like very surprising statistics. It's the market that's hiding in plain sight. So Peter Thiel, one of our investors, he likes to talk about things that are hiding in plain sight. And so we talk about making a massive impact on animal agriculture. We can't remove our pets from that equation. And so this really started to make me think about potential options, right? What are the things that we can actually do? One thing that really opened my eyes was actually Professor Oken's paper, which was published out of UCLA, which actually looked at the effects, both the environmental and the effects on animal agriculture, that 25 to 30%, which was published about 2 to 3 years ago, Florian, right? Yeah, about 2 years ago, roughly. And so that was a really powerful turning point in my way of thinking about things. So there's a penny, so that's... I like improv, by the way. You can shout things out. I enjoy that, right? I'll make it a little more interactive because I know some people are, have different styles. Mine is very interactive. You can just shout things out at me, and I'm happy to deal with that. I like that. I deal with a lot of Berkeley people who are like, GMOs are evil, and then I'm like, why, sir? So anyway, so we started to look at how do we make an impact, right? How do we actually make an impact on reducing, starting first, just in the US, reducing the impact that our pets have on the animals that are slaughtered. So it's getting so ridiculous right now that many of you know that there's actually an allergy issue with pet food. I know, Steve, you're definitely familiar with that, having experienced the veterinary space, but our pets are actually becoming allergic to the foods that we feed them, and that gets a lot of desperate pet parents. I'm sure some of you have experienced this, where dogs are actually become allergic to the food that they're eating. They become allergic to beef or to pork or to chicken or to turkey, and so they start cycling through different protein sources. We already have alternative protein in the pet food space. People are slaughtering kangaroos and bringing them to the US and turning them into pet food because dogs and cats are becoming allergic to standard pet food. They're also slaughtering crocodiles too. I mean, it's ridiculous, and feeding it to our pets. So when we started to look at making an impact, I started to look at first, is meat sustainable? No, it's not. We're speaking to like-minded people. I'm here because I think that the ethical aspect of animal agriculture is a really important thing that we have to stop. Industrial animal agriculture is something I personally don't agree with, and most of my team feels the same way, both in terms of the animals that are pushed through the system and suffer terribly, as well as sustainability aspects of it. But one of the big challenges that we have in plant-based foods is that plants tend to be relatively low in protein, right? And everyone talks about protein in pet food. There's a new trend in pet food, which is how high of a protein content can you get? I don't know if you've kind of seen this, but it's like, 30% is high protein. Now everyone wants high protein. Right now the big trend is also putting wolves on the packaging and saying our dogs are wolves. They need raw meat. Turns out you feed cats and dogs raw meat, sometimes they get sick, they get salmonella just like we do. And so there are a whole bunch of issues around our framing of how we feed our pets and what we feed them. The challenge with plants for dogs is that it's typically not high in protein. The challenge for plants for cats is that cats are actually obligate carnivores, unlike dogs. right? Dogs are omnivores, cats are obligate carnivores. That means they're missing certain key nutrients in that are in flesh that is not in plant-based foods. And so this really created a challenge for myself and my team when we started to look at this. And so we basically said, okay, so plants aren't the answer, right? And for those of us that are vegan or plant-based, okay, now where do we go? The next step was like, okay, meat's not the answer, great. Cultured meat, we think, is a part of the answer, right? So cultured meat, when it gets approved, we're probably looking at 2 to 3 years before we have scalability and probably FDA approval. And then to get to a price point that's affordable for pet food is probably going to take another at least 5 years, right? So after approval, we're probably going to need a couple more years afterwards to get to a scale where we can actually do that. So having been involved with investing in companies like Memphis Meats, Finless Foods, Mission Barns, and then Shiok Meats, I've had a lot of experience in this space and with lots of different types of cell-based meat products. And it became clear to myself and my team that that is one part of the solution, where we really think a big part of the future of protein is coming from is actually going to be fungi. And so that's kind of where we ended up. And so we actually created and we brew our own koji, which is a type of, for those of you that are not familiar with it, it's used in miso soup. It's the thing that gives the umami taste of miso soup. It's used to make soy sauce. It's actually, we, humanity, have been using it for about 9,000 years. We think it actually makes a great ingredient for pet food. For dog food, it's a pretty straightforward inclusion. For cat food, that's something that's going to take a little bit longer. One, as we all know, cats are super picky, and so that's a challenge. And then also, we know that we have to supplement it with carnitine and taurine, which is something that they need in cat food. There's also some issues around pH for cat food as well. So we want to make sure that we have the perfect food for both our dogs and our cats. The bigger global picture, why does this even matter? Yes, the US is one country, but it is not the whole world. The whole world is actually a bigger part of the story. It gets even more challenging when we look at the 500 dogs that are on this planet today. Not strays, pet dogs that are on this planet today. 500 million pet dogs. They eat meat typically twice a day, right? And they're eating a lot of meat, right? They probably eat more meat than the entire US, right? And so then the next question is, okay, well, 500 million dogs, roughly 500 million cats out there. Now we're starting to see 1 billion animals eating meat twice a day. So really we're talking about 7 billion today, plus another billion today, which is 8 billion. Now what happens if the world reflects the US, which typically it tends to, right? So as people get richer, they want to eat like us, they want to live like us, they want to use energy like us. What happens then? By the way, they want to buy plants like us. It's another weird little thing. We end up getting lots of house plants, and so the world wants to get lots of house plants too. We've looked at these trends. So what happens then? Then we have 70% pet ownership in the US, right? That's why there are more dogs and cats than there are children in the US. If the world reflects that, then we're going to be talking about a world of 2050 with 10 billion people. We're going to be talking about 7 billion more dogs and cats. So it's really not 10 billion people, it's 17 billion other organisms eating food, and on top of that, those 7 billion are primarily eating meat-based products. Unlike us, right? Like most people, even like omnivores, you're not going to eat a hamburger at breakfast, dinner, and lunch, right? Like you'll probably have a salad at some point. You're probably not going to eat just meat all the time. So that's basically where we're at. So we think that there is a global opportunity to really deal with what's going to be happening next. And when everyone's like, well, yeah, but 70% pet ownership is just not going to happen worldwide. China's pet ownership rate, based on the kind of fuzzy data we've been able to get, is growing 30% year on year. 30%, right? 30%. India, from a much lower base, is growing 30% year on year. That's just 2 markets. We're not including Latin America. We're not including Africa, right? So these are massive global markets that we are already seeing massive changes in these spaces right now. And the reality of it is, where there are no pets today, we will make more. So if you go to China, which I did recently, I went to Shanghai and I went to Shenzhen, they are having a boom of pet stores. So you go there and it's like the old pet foods, the kind of the ones that we no longer like in the West, which is, they have like designer dogs like on the window, right? And people are buying designer dogs. And so we will probably see an evolution of where that goes, but we're seeing it massively across the world. And so this is why my team and I felt compelled to really start a company to disrupt this space. So with that, I kind of want to open it up. I like questions, so just shout stuff out. If it has to do with pet food, great. If it has to do with pets, great. If it has to do with building companies, great. If it has to do with clean meat, great. Plant-based stuff, great. Anything you want to talk about. Investor, I can wear my entrepreneur hat, my investor hat. I'm still an investor for Babel. You're very open. So any questions? Yeah, so definitely. I can speak to the challenges of selling this product. So one thing that we've noticed, which is really strange and interesting, is that we get a lot of resistance from vegans and vegetarians for this product. Right? That was not what we expected at first. So it's surprising, right? And so we actually would love to reach out to the community to help us with education. The fact that dogs are omnivores and can be really healthy on a plant-based diet, the most resistance we tend to get is actually weirdly from a lot of vegans and a lot of vegetarians. Like people who eat meat or like flexitarians or reducitarians seem to be much more open to the message because they feel like they're like their dog. They sometimes have meat and they can also not have meat. Whereas the vegans, and we've had some really bizarre arguments with vegans who come from more of an ideological perspective than a facts-based perspective. And so that's actually been one of the big challenges, which is education. And so that, I think that's, as an industry, I mean, there are plant-based dog food products out there, but we think that the big challenge, if you really want to move the needle, you have to challenge conventional pet food. And to do that, you have to educate a much broader population that a more sustainable option is possible. And so that's really our message, right? So we're focusing on sustainability around our pets because people actually care about that. Like the majority of people care about sustainability. In the US alone, we've actually done the research. There are 50 million pet parents who actually care about sustainability, right? So, that is our message. That's who we're targeting, and that's one of the challenges. That's actually one of the main reasons we've come out with our treats as well. We think the treats are a great way of educating people about the opportunities of sustainable alternative proteins. And so that's where we start. It's an easy thing for pet parents to like treat. It's like you don't have to commit to switching your dog just yet, but now actually instead of that treat being a chicken treat or a beef treat or something else, we're providing an alternative. I have a few minutes left. Great. So does that help explain kind of our rationale and where we're thinking?
What are the objections?
The objections? Yeah, so this is really interesting. So a lot of people have been sold on this raw diet. So we're getting objections two different fronts. So
from the vegans?
From the vegans. The vegans are actually saying that dogs are carnivores. 5 minutes on Google will show you that dogs are omnivores. But I think where it's very confusing is that dogs are part of the order Carnivora, right? But so are pandas, by the way, and pandas eat bamboo. And so like bears are omnivores and they're part of the order Carnivora. And so I think that's where the challenge is. Like we have to find really fun and engaging ways to help educate people, where it's like when they're like, this is animal cruelty, dogs are carnivores, you can't feed them a plant-based diet, it's wrong, they'll die. And then you'll have people posting pictures their dogs have been eating like homemade lentils and rice for like 10 years and the dog looks like 5 years old. Like these are the things that are happening. And so I think these are one of the big challenges.
Those are the objections you're getting
from vegans? No. Specifically, oh, you've had the opposite?
Yeah, vegans and vegetarians usually say, my dog, plant-based for sure, no problem. It's the cats that,
Oh yeah, no, the cats are different. The cats are a different story. So the cats, the cats is more nuanced.
Raw feeders are completely against plant-based.
Yeah, but interesting enough, weirdly, this is what we're noticing as well. The people who feed their dogs raw are actually more open to our products than. It's very strange, right? Like I think this is the challenge. Like we were just talking about marketing. The markets are very humbling teachers, right? You go out and you have a certain assumption around things that will resonate with customers, and you're wrong. You just don't know where you're wrong. And so some of our biggest allies are actually raw feeders. because they have the same concerns that we do. They care about sustainability, they care about the environment, they care about healthy food for their pets, and they read, right? They'll educate themselves. They'll say, okay, well, yeah, I could switch out some of my meals, with some of the meat-based jerkies that I'm doing. I'll switch them out, and we'll have some treats, simple ingredients, good for the environment. Strange, not a lesson I think that we thought we would learn. Yeah. So is product development in pet food faster than for humans, and are there any regulations? So the answer is, I wish it were faster. Honestly, we've got our head of operations, Abril, here, and so Abril and I go back and forth all the time. She really focuses on making the best product we can make. When we first launched, I had the ridiculous and mistaken idea that we'd launch our treats within like 3 months. That was ridiculous. Turns out that just shipping, getting the labeling, getting the bags done. Florian is our chief marketing officer. He works on the bags. Getting the bags done can take 1 to 3 months. Just packaging, right? So just packaging is hard enough. Now, product development, it's strange, right? In the pet space, because when we went into the pet space, most of us are not veterans in the pet space. Our chief veterinarian is Dr. Ernie Ward, but we went in and all the data is kind of patchy. Like, what is a good dog treat? What is acceptability? How do you measure that? These are things that Abril had to essentially reinvent to try and figure out how we create products. And so that turned out to be very challenging. Formulation turned out to be challenging. And from a regulatory perspective, it's actually, people misunderstand the pet food space. So a lot of people think that the pet food space is just an easy way to get bad food onto the quickly. Turns out that the pet food space is regulated by the FDA, same as human food. So to sell a pet food product, it has to be grass, generally recognized as safe, same as human food. At that point, once you get grass, you can start selling human food. Once you get grass as a pet food, you can't start selling pet food. Now you have to go to AFCO, which is like a quasi-public-private partnership, and get a name for your food, right? Your protein or whatever it is. Once you get a name, a named ingredient, then it goes down to the 50 states, and it's regulated at the 50 state level. So you have to deal with all 50 states. Unlike human food, it's weird. And we're learning more and more of the weird quirks, like as you'd expect. Some states are really easy and cool. Weirdly, California is actually a pretty cool state when it comes to talking to your regulators. And there are other states that weirdly are not easy and cool. So we learn a lot of lessons, yeah.
So pet food, unlike human food, they eat the same thing potentially 3 times a day.
That's right.
For 15 years.
That's right.
How do you?
I'll repeat that, yes, yeah.
Did you or how do you do your toxicity studies of that long-term exposure?
I'm very glad you asked. This is actually something that we've been working on. So just to share the question so that everyone can hear it. So pet food, dogs eat it 2 to 3 times. Dogs and cats eat it 2 to 3 times a day. They will live off of that product for their entire lives. That's actually regulated, right? So there's a certain amount of nutrients that have to go into the product. That's why there's an AFCO certification. Your product should always have AFCO. The question is, how do we do the toxicity study testing, right? This is something which is actually very hot at the moment, and not hot in a good way. And hot in a bad way in the sense that some other companies have done animal testing. That's something we're against. So we don't do lab animal-based testing as a company, and we really want to shine a light, right? And so one of the big things that most people don't know is that conventional pet food actually still tests on dogs and cats in labs. So every time you see a new flavor, new formulation, new variety, guess what's happened? There's been a dog in a lab that lives its entire life in a lab that's been tested on, that has been fed that food for weeks on end and tested. And in some cases, so digestibility testing, just to give you an example of what a very cruel and inhumane practice that still happens as a gold standard in the pet food industry, is you do a digestibility study. Do you know what that is? Okay, digestibility study is you basically take a treat or some food, you put in a little sachet, a little bag, you stuff it down the throat of the dog, and then as it's being digested in its stomach, you have time points where you pull out the food that's being tested, and you look at it and you see how digested that product is. That is called a digestibility study. This is the gold standard. So almost every single conventional pet food company does this testing. Not cruelty-free. Almost every single dog food, outside of the fact they kill animals, is not cruelty-free. Yeah. And so this is, we will be looking at this, so we're thinking about coming out a campaign to try and move the entire industry towards cruelty-free testing. So we do in vitro lab testing. It's actually FDA approved, right? So it is FDA approved. There is an alternative on the market that's FDA approved, but companies don't do it because it's not their practice, and it's maybe a little bit more expensive, like not much more expensive, to do cruelty-free testing. Crazy. So this is why we want to go into this industry, disrupt this industry. Like we think that all pet parents, whether you have a dog or a cat at home, are not going to want to have a product that is made by like testing a dog or a cat in a lab and like hurting them, right? I mean, these animals are sacrificed at the end, right? Killed to be tested for like literally dog food. Like a new treat that comes out gets tested on a dog in the lab. Wrong. So we're going to end that. So that's really our mission. So when we say we're going after conventional pet food, we really are going after conventional pet food. And we know because there's one big brand that's been messing with us that doesn't like what we're doing. Yeah.
So one of the sort of, I guess, misconceptions maybe about pet food after I've heard about all this processes
Yeah.
go through is that it is lower quality.
Yep.
Like, would you eat your pet product and what is the quality?
I love it. I love that question. I love that question. Abril is going to go nuts because I'm not supposed to say that I eat my own, we eat our own pet food and I eat our own pet food. I do always, all the time. And actually, so this is my challenge, right? So I still have this challenge. I think that every CEO of every major pet food company should be forced to eat their own pet food, right? Guess what? They won't because it's toxic.
I just ate some downstairs.
Yes.
I
What?
just ate some downstairs.
Oh, you ate some downstairs. How was it?
Cool.
Cool?
Crunchy, hints of peanut butter.
Crunchy hints of peanut butter and koji. There we go. Abril's dying over there. She's like, it's dog food. Yes, just a reminder, it is dog food. It is vegan, but it is dog food. Yes. Yeah, but yeah, so basically, I don't believe that it's right that we feed our animals something that is literally not human, it is bad for us. So the things that are in dog food at the moment, in meat, and it comes from the meat, is we know there's euthanasia drug. The FDA allows a certain percentage of euthanasia drug. Occasionally it kills dogs and cats because the amount of euthanasia drug goes up too far past the allowed amount. So there is an allowed amount of euthanasia drug. It's a small molecule that makes animals sick that we feed to them every day, right? And then there's also plastics and other things we know we cause cancer. I have a theory, I can't prove it yet, but I want to, which is that the plastic, at least the plastic in the pet food, is probably causing an increase in cancer in dogs and cats. I think that's the case. We know the plastic, if you eat it, melted plastic, it's carcinogenic. Okay, 5 minutes? Great, thanks. Yeah.
Why are they that?
Why are they putting? Okay, why are they putting? Like, why is that shit in there, right? Good question, right? So you should have a look. So Freedom of Information Act is a wonderful thing, right? When the federal government works, I know unfortunately now it's not working, but you can actually look at the federal inspections of rendering plants. That's the name of the plants that actually process the dog food. And the inspection reports are eye-opening, right? So what ends up happening is if you're allowed to take meat and put it in somewhere else, and it's not human-grade meat, you can do all sorts of things which are just really disgusting, right? So you can there have been documented cases of roadkill, like literally something gets killed on the side of the road, throw it in the render, it's a cheap source of meat, right? There have been like rats that have been found on site, killed, right? And then thrown into the rendering plant to just put it back in. The euthanasia drug is actually a big question. So people are like, how does euthanasia drug get into dog food? It doesn't make any sense. Because in industrial animal agriculture, guess what? A lethal injection is too expensive to use. Like a cow, I'm sure you've all seen the videos, cow gets knocked in the head and its throat slit, right? Same thing with chickens and all the variants of that, right? Reusable processes of killing. Expensive animals get euthanized. And so at minimum, we know that there's horse meat going in. These are the horses that are being euthanized at scale. And there are some theories, there's no proof that I've seen so far, but there are some theories that some of the dogs and cats that are euthanized in shelters are actually being recycled straight back in. So there may be cannibalism that we're actually doing. The plastic comes from a very simple place. So the plastic is actually, so you know, have you ever wondered where all of that meat that goes bad goes from, like in the grocery store? Like meat goes bad, right? Where does that go? You can't feed it to humans when it's gone bad, right? Because we have the risk of salmonella and various other things. So where does it go? Now you know, right? It goes into the rendering plants for pet food. And the crazy thing is, if you had to have humans pulling off essentially potentially toxic meat, like meat that's gone bad with salmonella and all sorts of E. coli, you took the plastic off, you're exposing humans now to something that could make them very sick. So guess what many rendering plants do? They leave the plastic on. So the truck comes in, rolls up with all this plastic and styrofoam wrapped meat, and they just put the whole thing in the rendering plant. The renderer is really high temperature, so it kills everything, and it also melts plastic. And then the plastic's gone. Yeah, we're done. Yeah, perfect. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Ryan. I've actually also eaten Ryan's treats, and they're great.
Yeah. Come downstairs. We have treats, so come and get treats. Yes.
Just so everybody knows,
Yeah.
Mel